Right, yeah, these are I actually completely forgot about these to be fair. Um, which I don't know why, because this is like right up my street, this stuff. But yeah, luckily Maria messaged me again, and yeah, this one, and then there's another one as well, which I want to get to. Cathy O'Brien, I kind of think I've heard of her, or like heard her spoke of, because like I say, I'm into this kind of stuff. And actually, when I first got into like all the different conspiracies and just learning, MKUltra was never one I really believed. I don't know why. I just never believed it. But then it wasn't till years and years later that was never one I looked into. um, and it wasn't till years later where you hear all these horrendous stories from the child homes and um, where they was literally experimenting on the kids like it. And anyway, we'll get into her story. But yeah, let's go.
$252 if we deliver them. This book is information. It is truth, and it is truth that will set us free.
Oh, hold on. Let's go.
Absolutely intent on the idea that the information contained in this book will indeed reach the eyes of those who can see. And the information contained on this video that's being produced right now will reach the eyes of those that can hear and see truth, so that they will get out and begin to wonder why Sirhan had the same psychiatrist, Jolyon West, Lee Harvey Oswald, Timothy McVeigh. Now, boy, I'll tell you, this guy's real popular. He's right down here at UCLA. He was also the first person to call me on my unlisted, unpublished, fake name telephone out in the boonies outside of Anchorage, Alaska, after I rescued Cathy and her daughter. And a woman by the name of Margaret Singer, who may be a friend of one or two of y'all out there, but I don't miss a chance to bring out the fact that she was the one that sent another character in on us up there. I wasn't connected well enough to be told not to do anything on my own. And at the time, I was absolutely out of my mind from hearing this stuff. I was suffering from what is known as post-traumatic stress disorder. I was shell-shocked after hearing what Cathy and Kelly were showing me, and then or telling me, and I was showing this information to members of the intelligence community and members of U.S. Customs and other branches of federal law enforcement who validated it for me, thank you. I apologize to everybody that buys our book and reads it, because I tried to make my portion of it informative enough to where it wouldn't hurt you. And I told Cathy that she had to include enough detail in the book, such as the anatomical details of her alleged abusers, so that we could get them into court and make them drop their pants. That kind of leads me into the presenter for the second oldest profession, or first oldest profession. I'm going to get to that same reverse. Now, who was first? Well, I don't know. It's a long debate in the intelligence community whether prostitutes or spies came first and second. I don't know. Ladies first, okay. That's a good one. At this point, I'd like to present Cathy O'Brien, the person who rescued my spirituality. Wasn't a bad guy, but I needed that extra push, and I'm mighty proud to have been with her for over 8 years now.
I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out here tonight to arm yourselves with knowledge about a tool that's being covertly used to usher in what Adolf Hitler and George Bush termed New World Order, and that's mind control. I've enjoyed talking with quite a few of you earlier this evening pertaining to how mind control has affected some of you or some of your loved ones. Mind control is very prevalent in this country and around the world. These criminals that are in control of our country operate on the philosophy that secret knowledge equals power. Many government secrets and personal reputations were staked on the belief that I could not be deprogrammed to remember those things that I was supposed to forget. They were wrong. For as intelligent as these perpetrators are, they're limited in their thinking by their own immorality. They don't have wisdom. They don't think deep. And they never considered the strength of the human spirit. They never considered what would happen when a good man like Mark Phillips gained knowledge of their secrets and used them to restore a mind rather than control one. I know that I'm extremely fortunate to have survived my CIA, MKUltra, White House, Pentagon level, trauma-based mind control victimization. Now that I'm in control of my own mind and ultimately my free will, I'm telling everything that I witnessed and saw and heard and photographically recorded behind the scenes of this New World Order effort. By telling their secrets, their power is eroding.
Do you know something crazy I just noticed with that, with what she said then, is that she said, I'm telling, which is a very childlike thing. I'd imagine she's had trauma from a child. I don't know her story yet. But it's almost as if she reverted to the child who was the victim, as if that was the child's retaliation. Yeah.
Speak out to give voice to the many mind control victims and survivors out there who can't think to speak out and tell what they know and what they've endured. I speak out for the sake of my daughter, Kelly, who's now 16 years old and is a political prisoner in the custody of the state of Tennessee, where she's being denied any rehabilitation due to the political affluence of her abusers. She's counting on Mark and I to get this word out on her behalf.
This is what's crazy as well. What she just said then, political abusers. There's a reason why people they don't get investigated, and it's like John Wedger in our country has political things, but the Marc Dutroux case in Belgium, all the people connected to that would have collapsed Belgium. It would have collapsed Belgium's power structure. There was so many people involved. It was such a big cover-up of abuse and this type of thing. And that's what it gets deemed as. Once you start getting into the political, like John Wedger gets threatened with being a terrorist because it's a threat to the overall power of things. When it becomes politicians, that's when they'll really crack down on you, as if the politics matters more than the abuse.
For Kelly's sake and for your sake, Mark and I have gone to great lengths to document the facts and the truths that are listed in our book, Transformation of America. Transformation of America is self-published, uncensored, so that you can have the facts that you have a right to know and a need to know. These truths have been covered up and kept from all of us for a long time under a blanket of so-called national security. This is the same blanket of national security that has prevented us from obtaining justice despite the extensive evidences and documentation we have. We have over 27,000 documents and evidences. Government insider testimony, medical records, more than enough evidence for any legal procedure in this country, including congressional. But this blanket of national security has stopped us from obtaining justice. It's time for truth to prevail. It's time that these truths were brought to light for the sake of humanity as we know it. I'd like to begin by defining mind control by my experience. I realized that my experience was extreme, that the extensive, total robotic, absolute mind control I endured is more limited than the kind of mind control that's proliferating in society. Mind control has kind of a sliding scale where you've got the total robotic mind control on one side, and you've got mind control that's proliferating, such as in occultism in this country, or Global Education 2000, where children are losing their freedom of thought and their ability to critically analyze. There's so many different aspects.
And this is what I mean as well. This is why you've got to, I mean, I don't mean to talk down to people, but why it's good to be interested into a broad thing. Because I said it in something else the other day that I've seen in podcasts with all different types of people. And one thing that like psychiatrists, psychologists, and all these different people that are in that field, every one of them, different fields, come to the conclusion that when you go to school, when you see a child, like each human is born with its own unique genius, its own uniqueness and its own talent, and but over but the school system literally takes that out of them, which again doesn't necessarily mean that the programming is, it doesn't even, like, although I'd say it is intentional, you don't even have to buy into the fact that it's intentional. The fact is, the way the school system sets up does program. It does show you that you can program a human being. Like, there are things where you can see this, where it doesn't have to be conspiracy world. You can just see it play out. But I can say, like, yeah, I'm not going to say the school system's bad, because it does help you to realize what the work world is you're going to go into, and gives you a bit of a, but also you do see people say that spark of uniqueness that's in children goes throughout their school programming. Yeah, so that's what I mean. You don't always have to take it into the world of conspiracy and think, oh, this is all just conspiracy nonsense. You can program, even if you don't think the intent behind it is evil, there is still a programming process, and it affects the human being and the human mind and stops a human thinking. Kanye puts it a great way. Your brain is full of tables. And you think, what does that mean? But he says it's like, at one point in your life, you was a toddler and you would have jumped up on a table, or like done a big scene and done something crazy, and people around you would tell you, no, you don't do that, you don't act like that. And he's like, to the point where you think that the jumping on that table is inherently bad thing to do, and you stop doing it, and over your life it's just a whole load of tables that have built up, the things people have told you not to do. And I mean, like I say, there is a purpose for that, but then if you understand that that can happen to the human mind, you can definitely exploit it.
Of society that are affected by mind control in varying degrees. It's imperative that this information get out. And as I explained, my victimization, it certainly can be applied to all different facets of mind control and mind manipulation. And as Mark and I have heard so many, many times from people who have read the book and heard us speak out, that this is a thread that's tying things together. All of a sudden, this whole new world order is making sense. The erosion of constitutional values, the erosion of morality in this country, all of a sudden, it begins to make sense when we learn about mind control. I was born in 1957 in Muskegon, Michigan, to a multi-generational incest-based family. This means my father was sexually abused as a child, my mother was sexually abused as a child, and they were sexually abusing me. My father sexually abused me as far back as I can remember, and I've often heard him state that he began substituting his penis for my mother's nipple while I was still an infant. I tell you this so that you can understand that my sexuality was confused in infancy. It was put into an area of my brain that's much like survival, like eating and drinking would be. I tell you these facts so that you can be better armed and understand what's happening in society. And name names. Mark and I name names in our book, Transformation of America, not so that I can say, well, I was in the White House with so-and-so. I mean, I missed the whole glamour part. But this is so you know who the problem is and where these problems lie. The sexual abuse that I was enduring was so horrific that I developed dissociative identity disorder. This used to be termed multiple personality disorder, and I'm so glad they've changed it to dissociative identity disorder.
This is crazy because this like must have been a while ago. You can just tell by the picture. So the fact that because what she's saying here is what every expert in child abuse and whistleblowers, and they all say that is something dissociative identity disorder. That is like, but I think she's saying it back then, way before there was the wealth of information that we have now on mental health. She's saying these things that now is only coming out really, and people are actually even now people don't really talk about it. But you are like everything she's saying. I've seen multiple victims of this same thing, and it's
because it really more aptly describes the compartmentalization that occurs when a person endures trauma that is literally too horrible to comprehend. Even though I couldn't understand that what my father was doing was morally wrong, the pain and the suffocation of his abuse was so extensive that I developed dissociative identity disorder. It certainly was incomprehensible. There was no place for it in my mind to deal with such horror. Therefore, I developed a compartment in my brain, a little area behind amnesic barriers that was actually the neuron pathway shutting down in my brain in order to compartmentalize the memory of abuse so that the rest of my mind could function normally as though nothing had happened. So if I'd see my father at the dinner table, I didn't remember sexual abuse. But as soon as he unzipped his pants, the part of me, that part in my brain that knew how to deal with that horrific abuse, the neuron pathways actually physically opened up so that that part of my mind could deal with my father again and again and again as needed. I certainly had a lot of experiences within that compartment that dealt with my father's abuse. But I didn't have a full range of perceptions. I had a very limited perception, a very limited view. Therefore, I'm so glad it's not termed personality anymore. I developed another compartment in my brain to deal with my mother's abuse. Her abuse was primarily psychological. She suffered from dissociative identity disorder herself, and I don't hold her accountable for her actions the way that I do my father, who is fully aware of what he was doing. My mother, in spite of her inability to control herself, destroyed any remnants of self-esteem that I might have developed. And her abuse was so horrific that I developed another compartment in my brain just to deal with my mother. I developed another compartment.
That's another thing, John Wedger. Can't recommend John Wedger enough, but he says that typically when you're dealing with this type of abuse, you're dealing with men. He's like, but when you do get women, he's like, women abuse with a level of maliciousness that a man can't muster. He's like, it's so rarer that you come. He's like, you come way more are likely to come across men that are doing this. But he's like, but when you do find the women, them women are evil.
To deal with the child pornography that my father was subjecting me to. He was earning his living as a worm digger on a sixth grade education and supplemented the family income with child pornography that was being distributed through the local Michigan mafia pornography ring. At that time, there's a criminal faction of our government that was interested in targeting children such as myself for mind control, because this compartmentalization of memory was something that they deemed ideal for keeping government secrets. After all, if I couldn't think to remember, how could I tell about it? Additionally, people who suffer from dissociative identity disorder develop a photographic memory behind those amnesic barriers, because the brain has a defense mechanism that when trauma occurs, it photographically records events surrounding trauma. And an example of this would be that many of you who are old enough to remember, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, most people know exactly where they were and what they were doing, because this was an event that traumatized the nation. And this exemplifies how the mind photographically records events surrounding trauma. So behind these amnesic barriers, I had a photographic memory, which the government deemed ideal for programming. That way I could deliver messages to and from government leaders, or in my case, also drug lords, who were involved in funding the black budget and funding the New World Order controls. They're interested in programming me so that I would deliver the messages verbatim. When I delivered messages, I delivered exactly what I was told, using the voice inflections of my abusers, with no conscious comprehension of what I was even saying. It was just a tape recorder just parroting out exactly what I'd been told. Another aspect that the government was interested in is that as a dissociative identity disordered person, I had no concept of time, because I was going from compartment to compartment of my brain with no memory of what had happened before. Therefore, I had no ability to even keep track of time, and a concept of it was just absolutely impossible. And it also makes for, if I didn't know what I was doing earlier, I wouldn't know to be tired while I was overdoing something else. Therefore, a person who suffered from dissociative identity disorder had extensive physical endurance, just superhuman strength and ability to keep going and going and going and going. Dissociative identity disorder persons also develop 44 times visual acuity. Very often that's why you see them wide-eyed with the whites around their eyes, because they're actually taking in more of their surroundings than the average person. 44 times more detail than the average person sees. That certainly makes them perfect marksmen for mercenary operations or for intelligence in different areas that the government was interested in developing mind control. I was a chosen one, or a prime candidate, for mind control because of the sexual abuse that I had endured. My sexuality had been enhanced. Therefore, I was used as a sex slave and also delivered messages to and from these government leaders. At that time, because a government, this criminal faction of our government, was so interested in dissociative identity disordered persons, they knew that any child that was subjected to child pornography had to have endured trauma so horrible that they had to be suffering from that disorder. Therefore, this criminal faction of our government sanctioned this child pornography ring so that they could identify and target children such as myself for the project. At that time, the politician, local Michigan mafia politician, The politician who was protecting this Michigan Mafia pornography ring was a guy named Gerald Ford. This is the same Gerald Ford that went on to become the first unelected president of the United States. Gerald Ford, I never perceived his political affluence. I only perceived him as another abuser like my father, because Gerald Ford also sexually abused me as a child and sexually abused me right on through my mind control victimization until Mark rescued my daughter Kelly and I in 1988.
Yeah, so many, again, I've watched a lot of this stuff, so a lot of the things she's saying, but I can't help but think she must have had a tough time coming out with this back then. Because it's like, their stories are so crazy that no one would believe them. Now it's different, because now so many people have come out. There's been endless scandals with elite things. But what she's saying about this, the sexualizing a child from birth, and then that being valuable, because there is, it's what she's saying with the DID, dissociate, yeah, identity disorder. Undercover pedophile. I watched the guy who went undercover getting pedophile rings, in our country. But he says, if when you're in honest, when you're doing them things and you're undercover, and a group has brought you in, and they'll there's a child coming in. He's like, when you go in there, he's like, you think the child would be kicking and screaming, he's like, but they're not. He's like, the child is actually the calmest one in the room. He's been here, or she's been there hundreds of times, and it's just normal. And he's like, actually, the men are the ones that are like, basically, he's like, it's like the equivalent of junkies when heroin or crack or whatever, when their drugs about to come and they start getting excited, and they're high before they've even had to think. They're high just off of the idea and the excitement. He's like, that's what they are. He's like, they are like, that's, and he's like, and that's, he's like, it's good, because he's like, I get to see them in their offending mode. He's like, because when you'd speak to these people, you'd think there's no way in a million years this person could do that, because they're nice as pie. And yeah, he's like, but I get to see them in their offending mode. And he's like, you see that monster in them. But yeah, what's she saying with the child being so over sexualized that it's just normal to them. And as well, when she said as well, where you don't even people that it's nothing to do with government things and rings, just children that have been abused. But yeah, you hear them basically saying all the same things she says. Not even part of the ring, but one gangster, from our country. But he said that he's like, he was too young to even know what had just happened. He's like, but I would wake up and just know, like, he's like, I'd hurt, and he's like, but I didn't have any understanding of what sex was. And he's like, but you know something's happened, and you know that thing isn't right. You just don't know what, you can't. And he's like, and it also puts you in a position where you can't tell anyone, because you don't know how to word what has happened to you. But yeah.
Gerald Ford is not a pedophile per se. He's what I refer to as trisexual. He'll try anything. Any age, anybody, anytime, anywhere, just as long as he had control. Because he had a perversion of power, in addition to his interest in mind control. Therefore, it was Gerald Ford who came out to our house and explained to my father how to raise me in the project according to government specifications. My father had been caught sending this child pornography through the U.S. mails, and therefore he was approached and told that if he sold me into that project, that he would gain immunity from prosecution. My father remains free from prosecution to date for so-called reasons of national security. My father thought it was just absolutely wonderful, and immediately sold me into the project. He felt like the government condoned child abuse. So did I. I certainly felt like the government did. And my father went on to have 5 more children to raise in the project, so there were 7 of us in all. The rest are still awaiting freedom. Once my father agreed to sell me into the project, I was taken routinely to Mackinac Island, Michigan, which is a political retreat where the Michigan governor's mansion is located. It was a bohemian grove of sorts where politicians met and discussed New World Order controls, where they discussed mind control of the masses, mind control in the school systems, how to use occultism as a trauma base. One of my sexual abusers at that...
Yeah, we'll stop it there and come back. But yeah, this is great. Like, there's so many different things in this that I'm into. Not only just the elite, yeah, that kind of what she's talking about, that kind of shadow government that behind all the countries, really. The face government we all see, yeah, they're all at heads with each other, but you know behind the scenes they're all connected by this thing. But all the things, but not just that. Like, she's talking and trisexual. I even said that in something that we did of this. Yeah, John Wedger, he says that trisexual, and it is. It's that they will literally have anything. It's not. Um. Yeah, it's not a. It's not a. I mean, it is a pleasure thing for them, but it's not in the same. I mean, obviously in the same way, but it's not in the same way like adult sex is pleasurable. It's not that pleasure that they're getting from it. It isn't that. It's like she said, it's the controlling, the like kind of the evilness to it as well. But yeah, everything she said, like, and what's crazy, like, but then she's saying this all back then, Bohemian Grove saying back then. Now we all know about Bohemian Grove, and it's almost like as well. This is the other crazy thing I find with conspiracies. All the things that I was told, they're just crazy conspiracies. Once they actually get told that they are true, people go, well, and they just kind of brush it off like it's nothing, like it. And you're like, well, yeah, well, that's true, but yeah. And it's like, hold on, for years you've been saying that's a great, like, but yeah, Bohemian Grove. She's talking about a lot of things, and I can understand why there's people laughing in the, especially in this day and age, because this is so. To be fair, this is a strong woman to be able to do this, to be able to come out and talk about this like she's doing. Like, I'm talking at one point, well, Paul Tiernan, he's a gangster from the UK. At one point, he was right hand man to arguably the most powerful family, at least in London. I'd say the Adams family. He was our right hand man to one of the brothers. So he's high up, high ranking, respected gangster, tough guy. No one fucks with him. He handles shit um, like gangster. Uh, he said he come out and said he got abused when he was younger. Um, and he's like, I've never been able to talk about it, never. And he said it just come out of me. He went to rehab because although he was a big tough gangster, he also smoked crack and all of that shit. But he went to rehab and he said, yeah, it just come out in one of the sessions. And he's like, I never have spoke about that to anybody ever. And he's like, it took him. It happened when he was 7, and then again when he was 14, and it took him till he was 61. Now this is a man who's gone into meetings on his own with some of the most dangerous men, sat down and had meets to the point where they stood up and he had talked them off of crashing out, shook hands. This is a serious, serious man, but he couldn't talk about that, and it just come out by accident when he was in a therapy or in a group session in a rehab when he was 61. So the fact that this woman can come out and say what she's saying in a time where people had no real knowledge. This was crazy conspiracy stuff. It still is now, but now, like I say, there's so much more information and fact, and we've had Jimmy Savile, and you've got Harvey Weinstein and Epstein, and we know that there's a big cagoule of something. It's like Jeffrey Epstein went to prison for providing kids to people. To who? How come none of the clients are in prison? Because, like she said, they're all political people. John Wedger said it too. That they have literally rung him and said, "Listen, do not mention these names. Do not say these names because it's just..." And that to me gives people don't like John Wedger for that reason because he knows things and doesn't say it. But it actually, for me, gives him more credibility because he's like, I'm not. I've got a family and I don't want them attacked. And he's like, I'm not. He's like, he's like, if they tell me not to do something, he's like, I'm not going to deliberately provoke an attack from these people. But and to me, that gives him more credibility that he's there's stuff and he's like, when it's the right time, I'll tell you. But yeah, but he said that as well that that's when they get they really have a problem with it when it can disrupt the political um stability basically. And like I say, look up the Marc Dutroux case in Belgium. The amount of Belgium elite that was tied to that, politicians and all of that, it would have collapsed the whole country of Belgium. The country of Belgium would, their whole power thing would have collapsed. And it was such a big cover up that it was the fire brigade. Get this, the fire brigade went to the courts and blew out all the windows with the hoses of the courthouse and said that we're cleaning up the courts over this big scandal. And that's what John Wedger said as well. He's like, the fire brigade are the ones that would always back you out of and the emergency services too. He's like, but police, he's like, police are too easily bought with their pension because they will just say to a policeman, you keep going, then you're going to lose your pension. And it's like, you can see why they're literally being held by their nuts, basically. And that's what John Wedger says. The police are easily bought. You just threaten their pension and they'll shut the fuck up. But yeah, anyway, this is part one, and this, like I say, this is a great request, because not only the conspiracy side of things, but I'm quite interested to hear what she has to say about devil worship and all this sort of stuff, but also the kind of psychological. She's saying psychological, like again, words like the neuro, like this is words that we all know now, and because of Elon, because he keeps wiring monkeys up that they can control bloody tennis games with their brain. But yeah, it's like these are all things that we are a more informed people now with the internet and all of that. But she's coming out with all this stuff back then. I can fully understand. One, I can fully understand the people laughing as well because it will make you uncomfortable, and I'm sure there's people thinking this woman is crazy, but I don't. I think she is. Yeah, she's like I say. I look for because even the DID, I was thinking that how she's even talking about her father abusing her and things he did, and that's DID. How she's able to just say that so like disassociated. It's like she's not connected to that part of it. It's like yeah, and that's what Darren Jeffries. He's another one you should look up in our country. Horrendous story that man had. Another man that went on to be a dangerous criminal as well. That's another thing that happens with DID, the ability to go into crime, which obviously you will make sense. The things she said in this, it will make sense that you are able to do things, bad things to other people, and disassociate that with you as who you feel you are. Do you know what I mean? Because you've already got that DID working, so you can use that in a criminal element and not feel the guilt or whatever. Yeah, but Darren Jeffries, I mean, his story's horrendous, horrendous. Um, but they all are, no, they all are. It's like, yeah, it really makes you realize what an evil world. Anyway, that's part one. Sweet.